Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, we're going to talk about an incredibly cool book that has this amazing chapter on the secret of how to find the way to true happiness. This book is one of those classic genre books that came out in the 60s, which is like the post-New Thought era. I've referred to it as the New Thought before, but really I think it's the post-New Thought era. The New Thought era being in those 30s and 40s. And in the 60s, there were this group of books that came out that kind of used this technique and had a certain style of writing. I had several recent episodes where I read Anthony Norvell and David Troncoso and Reese P. Dubin in The Telecult Power. They all had a certain genre. They had incredible copy editing text that just made you want to buy the book. They promised the world. They were edited very interestingly with usually interesting techniques in a similar style to Joseph Murphy in many ways, where they will give an example of somebody with their first name and initial and give a story of how applying the technique worked for them. This particular one, I just loved reading it, and it's got some amazing techniques in it that we should try. So the story behind the book is more interesting. Now, the book in question is called Ultra Psychonics: How to Work Miracles with the Limitless Power of Psychoatomic Energy by Walter Delaney. On the back of the jacket, it says this book shows you how to penetrate into the amazing world of the psychic atom and control the mighty energy forces that flow through it. With this limitless power at your command, wealth, love, happiness are yours for the asking. Now, when it says about the author, it says Walter Delaney is one of the world's leading authorities on the psychic and occult sciences. Now, when I read this to you, you're going to find it funny when you know more about who Walter Delaney is. It says his profound knowledge is based not only on his own extensive investigations and years of study, but also on certain psychic secrets passed on to him by his ancestors. A member of a brilliant family which can trace its history back to the 12th century, and which includes holy men and witches, as well as political leaders, scientists, and captains of industry. Delaney spent many years analyzing and organizing the unusual wisdom that had come into his hands and fusing it with the latest discoveries of modern science. Of course, when I'm reading this, and I remember seeing this when I was a kid, but reading this, and it says his keen searching mind, sharpened by advanced training at 2 major universities and armed with the knowledge of 12 languages, soon uncovered the amazing power of Ultra Psychonics and worked out ways to use it for a wonderful new life of success, power, love, money, and spiritual fulfillment. Presently a key executive in one of the nation's top corporations, Mr. Delaney is widely known for his writings on psychic and mystical phenomenon, which have been published under many different pseudonyms. I have traveled to 3 continents to get the secrets I've put into this book, he reports, and it is the culmination of my life's work. Because I have no children to pass it on to, I'm giving it to the world so that this wisdom will not die. So I look up Walter Delaney. When I do a book like this, and I've only heard of this author because of the book, the next thing I would always do is look up the book. There's no other books written by Walter Delaney. So I start to do some additional research about Ultra Psychonics, and I look up the title of Psychonics, and I find out that there was an episode, This American Life, episode 532, where they talked about this book. Of course, I find stuff like that massively interesting. I want to know behind the scenes who this guy really is. You can always find out a lot more. Was there lawsuits against him? Did he get in trouble? It's always interesting to look behind the scenes on an author. For instance, if you go back and look at behind the scenes on Richard Bandler, the creator of neurolinguistic programming, well, there's like murder trial in his past. So I always look up these authors to see what is the story behind the story. I always find that to be interesting. And in the episode 532 of The American Life, Ira Glass introduces a segment called I Believe I Can Fly. And there's this book full of magical words that one of our contributors, Joseph Goldstein, found in his apartment when he was moving recently. He hadn't looked at over 30 years. It's called Ultra Psychonics, How to Work Miracles with the Limitless Power of Psychoatomic Energy. The book's premise, its basic premise, is that just as objects are composed of atoms, thoughts are composed of psychic atoms, or what Delaney calls psychons, ultrons, and egons. And so when you listen to the episode, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's true. I got the same feeling when I read the book. When you read the book, it feels like they're kind of making fun of these kind of books. But there's this one chapter that's just beautiful at the end that was really profound. And there are a few techniques that actually work. I've done a few of them, and they really worked. I actually noticed differences in energy and effects and had mental impressions and psychic phenomenon. But in that particular episode, they kind of mocked the book, saying that it was ridiculous, and they played music in the background to kind of mock it as some sort of joke. They actually find out that Walter Delaney was Joseph Schomburger. Joseph Schomburger was an editor at Parker Publishing. And he saw, as he was editing these books, that the writers were making so much money when they sold these books. They were making way more than the editor, and he had done so much work in editing these books, which are the books that I have read, like the Teleoccult Power. So he goes about writing his own book, and it's all written, and he hadn't even decided the name of the author. In the episode, they actually interview Barbara Schomburger, who's the daughter, and she kind of implied that it was kind of a joke, but he would never really talk about this stuff with his family. There were some of the money chants that he did use kind of when she was a kid, but Walter Delaney came from the name of a bathroom company, and he called himself Delaney when he went to the bathroom and saw the name at the very last second. I guess he was able to buy a house and take his wife to Europe with the money he made from the book. I tried to find out if I could reach her and talk to her about it, but I haven't been able to find her. So I wanted to do kind of a little study guide of this book, because the last chapter, it was so profound. And I took an extra few days, because I read this last week, and started taking these as action steps on my day. And when I did, my days just turned out to be fantastic. And looking back on actions that I can take to create a better reality, to help others, these actions that he describes in the chapter are amazing. But there's some other really cool techniques in the book, and I wanted to give those. And some of this episode will be like a meditation. I will ask some questions, and he recommends spending 5 minutes on these questions. So within this episode, I wanted to try some of these techniques with a couple of short 5-minute meditations that will consist of a couple of questions to ponder. But I wanted to give you some background on who Walter Delaney or Joe Schomburger really is. And it also is interesting to look at behind the scenes. When I looked up Joe Schomburger, it said he was a publisher, and that's all. It was in another, when somebody had said that he was a publisher, and that was all I could be able to find directly from him. It is certainly possible that these other authors are also pseudonyms. The episode that I just did by Reese P. Dubin clearly looks a lot like the same picture as Joseph Schomburger. So it's possible he wrote multiple books, but they implied it was only one book that they wrote. Now, on the inside of the book, it says, if you're tired of scrimping and saving for things you've never seemed able to afford, of working long hours for low wages, of begging and pleading to get things that should rightfully be yours, of always having to settle for second best, then this book is for you, for in it you will discover a whole new world, a world where miracles take place at your command, a world in which you are king and everyone else must bow to your wishes, a world, in short, where your most cherished and deeply desired dreams come true every day in the week. This is the world of Ultra Psychonics, the amazing new way to use the enormous power of a force called Psychoatomic energy to bring you the things you want. Now, at the beginning of the book, he asks you, how many times have you wished that your life could be better? How often have you wished there was a way you could get more of the good things of life, the fat bank accounts, the passionate love, the high honors, the deep admiration and respect that others seem to win almost without trying? If you're tired of scrimping and saving for things you never seem able to afford, of working long hours for low wages, of begging and pleading to get things that should rightfully be yours, of always having to settle for second best, then this book is for you. In the beginning of the book, he talks about the idea of psychic atoms and differentiates them in three ways, saying that there are psychons, particles charged with ESP force, the secret behind all psychic phenomenon such as telepathy, clairvoyance, magic, dowsing, prophecy, and the rest of the occult powers. And there are Ultrons, particles charged with hypnotic force, the secret behind control over others, love and romance, friendship, job placement, and all forms of mental domination. And then there are Egons, particles charged with growth force, the secret behind good health, long life, perfect memory, speed reading, and learning ability, and genius in communication. And he also says there are antis of each of these. There's anti-psychons and anti-ultrons and anti-egons. You can use both, and he gives different examples of using both. The book is broken up into several different branches. There's hypnology and pictronics and mnemonics, which talk about manipulating in some ways, persuading people with divination and magic and seeing the future, and telepathy and numerology. A newly created astrology system is in this book. At the very beginning, there's a couple techniques to start that I found interesting in understanding the psychonics, if I'm going to break it down for you. So the first would be how to stimulate the psychonic flow, which he said was one, to lie down in a dark, quiet room, close your eyes, and concentrate on blackness, imagining the entire universe to be filled with a dense black mist. 2, now imagine a tiny point of glowing yellow light like a tiny sun right in the center of your head. And 3, concentrate on the yellow point for 5 minutes every day until it shines bright and clear whenever you create it. This is a simple ritual, he says, but it's how to turn on the psychon generator. Once you have this generator flowing, then he has you do the psychon beam, which is 1, you turn on the generator like we just did, and then 2, imagine the yellow light is flowing out of the eyes and that your eyes are concentrating the light through their lenses as the sun is concentrated by a magnifying glass. Focus on an object 6 inches away from your eyes and imagine that the 2 beams of light are both concentrated on it in one bright spot, and then focus on an object 1 foot away, then 2 feet away, 3 feet away, and then 10 feet away. And that's focusing your psychon beam. Then he says to stimulate the flow of Ultrons, which lie at the core of psychic atoms, he says to turn on the psychic generator, which is imagine that yellow light from your head. And then, at the center of the yellow sphere of light, imagine there is a tiny reddish blue dot. This is the nucleus of the psychic atom. and is composed of red Ultrons and blue Egons. And then he says to imagine that the yellow ball of light, the Psychon beam, is starting to slowly spin around inside your head. Now increase its speed so that it goes faster and faster. Stop for a while if you are dizzy, but keep practicing until it is spinning at a very high speed. And you've just set up a psychonic cyclotron, he says, and it weakens the bonds of the central nucleus under your control. And then as the yellow ball spins faster and faster, you start to notice little specks of red leaving the center and flying off in all directions. And these are Ultrons. Speed up the yellow ball until the space it occupies is filled with a bright red glow. You've now generated the Ultron beam. I may have to do that in a meditation sometime soon. And then, once you've generated the Ultron beam, he says that you imagine that its red rays are shooting out of your eyes, as you did when you created the Psychonic laser. Practice focusing these beams in the same way as the Psychonic laser beams, and this is the Ultronic laser. So then there is a section where he says how to stimulate the flow of Egons, where you first of all place 2 pans of water on a table in front of you. One pan should contain cold water and the other warm. Place one hand in each pan for about 3 minutes. Generate an ultronic beam and focus it on a nearby blank wall. Concentrate on the blue nucleus of the psychic atom in the center of your head. Now imagine that there are wires running from your head down each arm. Let the blue power dots from the center of the nucleus start to flow down each arm into the fingers and back like an electric circuit. And then he says to switch your hands, put the hot hand in the cold water and the cold hand in the hot water, and you feel a strange sensation, and this is the Egonic Flow. Try to get the feel of it. Practice generating it several times until you can do so without using the pans of water. Then he says to turn on your Egonic computer. Once you have control of your Egonic Flow, there are a wide variety of ways you can use it. For instance, select any 2-digit numbers, try multiply them mentally. As you do so, imagine that you are entering them in a tiny computer inside your head, a computer built out of solid Egons, and pushing with blue Egonic power. At first, the answer will come very slowly, but it will come. And as you keep practicing for 5 minutes every night, just before you fall asleep, using the same 2 numbers, after a few days you'll find the answer comes in a flash. And then try other numbers, doing mathematical problems. So this is the introductory chapter, and he refers back to these techniques at different times. And I found it very interesting. A couple of other techniques before we get to my favorite part of the book was the ultrasonic suggestions, and he has 8 techniques of suggestions that you can use to persuade or even manipulate people. He has the psychosomatic suggestion, which is a link between the person's mind body, the archetype suggestion, referring to them as the wise old man or all-powerful king, or the direct suggestion, the indirect suggestion, and positive suggestions using negative suggestions. Pretty good chapter on that. And he has reverse suggestions and then auto-suggestion. His explanation is pretty legitimate as a means of communication and persuasion techniques. There is a divination technique in the book, later in page 60, on how to materialize the riches you desire, that I will give to you. And I have not tried it yet because I need to find a 2020 coin. But here's how it works. Just before you get ready to join the game or buy your lottery ticket or whatever else is involved, you test your luck. You take a special penny. It must be a new one of the current year, and wash it carefully with soap and water, saying the following money chant: 1 for the money, 7 for the show. Show me the answer, which way to go. And then you flip the coin, and you flip it 7 times. And if you have 7 heads, your luck is at its peak. 6 heads, your luck is very strong. 5 heads, your luck is barely operating. 4 heads, your luck is just average. 3 heads, your luck is weak. 2 heads, your luck is very weak. 1 head, your luck is strongly against you. And no heads, your luck is at rock bottom. Now, I'd like to do this test, and others that are listening or watching this episode, for you to try it. And I want you to tell me if it works. If you're in a situation where you can have your luck tested, which of course he uses his language calling it the electronic test. But I thought there was something to it. And there's another technique in the How to Materialize Riches You Desire, which is the Ultra Psychonic exercises. One of them is you buy a lottery ticket and you find a special envelope, fill it with clippings from your daily paper about people who have won previous lotteries. And each clipping radiates beneficial vibrations. You read the clipping and you feel the beneficial vibrations, and then you put the lottery ticket in the envelope. I thought that was a great technique to try. Why not? And he says if you're going to play cards, about an hour or 2 before the game, take a fresh pack and hold each card up to your forehead and project a beam of psychons through it. And this helps to sensitize your mind so that you can get telepathic impulses from the other players while the game is in progress. When conditions are right, you can practically know every card they hold in their hands. So, let me know if anybody tries those techniques. I love books like this. When you find an old book that has techniques like this, sometimes you know they're ridiculous, and sometimes you know, hey, if I try that, that might work. So before I read some of the last chapter, I wanted to go to one of my favorite chapters, which is The Minds Across Galaxies. There's a chapter on telepathy through time, using it through time, how to communicate with animals. And then there is a section on expanding your mind throughout the galaxy. And he has you imagine a ball of energy at the beginning as big as the Earth, and then you collapse it slowly down into the size that you can hold into your hands. And it becomes this densely packed ball of energy that you can use. And he does this technique, but then later on, he uses it to do things like communicate with people using this energy ball, and recommends using it in many of the different techniques. But one of the techniques is to then expand the ball outwards after you've collected it in and make it as big as the Earth and make it as big as the solar system, and then inevitably make it as big as the galaxy. But he says that it's difficult and acts like it's more than just an imagination exercise, implying that one person who tried it heard screaming as they extended their energy ball through the planet Jupiter. But the really poignant chapter that when I read it, I really felt like the beginning parts of this book were fun that he was just having with some cool techniques and ideas. Some of it he clearly believed in, and he was obviously very well read and refers to research at several parts of the book. The episode on This American Life that I referred to earlier, where they talk to the daughter, seems to imply that he was a very successful man. So it's possible these techniques worked for him and he was just very silent and did not talk about it with his family. And I get that impression that clearly he believed some of these techniques worked. There is an authenticity in the writing. But that episode seems to kind of ridicule. But the final chapter doesn't really have any woo-woo in it. It has some very basic principles, actions that you can take to find true happiness. And these 10 actions I now have written on my desk, and I refer to them. And if you can take these actions, and I wanted to read this chapter because I thought it was really well written. And I think that it will make a mark with you. And if you can practice these 10 actions, you will find the way to true happiness no matter what's going on in your life. He begins by saying the power to read minds, the power to dominate others, the power to find hidden treasures, and all of the others are only means to an end. No matter how much wealth, power, and psychic energy you possess, if you are not happy, you really have nothing. That is why the ultimate branch of Ultra Psychonics deals with the pathway to true happiness and peace of mind. Follow this pathway, and no matter what else happens, you will experience the greatest pleasure and joy that a human being can know. Ignore it, and no matter what else you achieve, your life will be empty and unfulfilled. Here then are the 10 actions of joy, which will help you find the kind of life you've always wanted, a life filled to the brim with gladness and delight. Each action is psychonically charged, and as you perform these actions in your daily life, you will feel a sense of warmth and fulfillment within yourself. Action 1, the joy of giving. This action involves helping those who are less fortunate than others, but it is not limited to them. You can also give things to those you love and care for, and you can give non-material things such as admiration, respect, and sympathy. The more you give, the more you will receive. Action number 2, the joy of humility. This action involves the acceptance of yourself for what you are. Without pride or haughtiness, it means that you must treat everyone with equal respect and courtesy, regardless of how much you may be superior or inferior to them. Action number 3, the joy of working. This action involves putting your full effort into everything you do, whether you do it for yourself or for another. It means not holding back, not slacking off, but giving your all at all times. Action number 4, the joy of caring. This action involves reverence for life. It means that you must never kill or hurt any living things. It means that you must care what happens to others, whomever they may be, and try to help them as much as you possibly can. Action number 5, the joy of fidelity. This action involves loyalty to those who love you and to your friends. It means that you must never betray their trust and never abandon them. It does not mean you must condone their wrongdoing, since this does not really help them. Action number 6, the joy of sufficiency. This action involves satisfaction and enjoyment of the things you have. A Hindu sage once said, "The secret of happiness is not in wanting more, but in desiring less. Cast out greed and envy from your mind and take pleasure in what you have earned." Action number 7, the joy of calmness. This action involves control of your passions and emotions. It means that you should control events rather than letting events control you. You should avoid anger, jealousy, resentment, and other negative emotional states. Action number 8, the joy of learning. This action involves the improvement and development of your mind. Just as you improve and develop the furnishing and decoration of your home, so too should you fill your mind with useful knowledge and helpful information. Action number 9, the joy of meditation. This action involves contemplation of yourself, others, and the universe on a regular basis. Set aside half an hour a day for this purpose, and you will soon note a tremendous difference in your outlook on life. Action number 10, the joy of reverence. This action involves merging yourself into the cosmic mind, according to the principles of your faith on a regular basis. It means that you submit yourself to a higher power, and by doing so, gain everything worth gaining. Why Ultra-Sophology is acceptable to all religions. Ultra-Sophology, which is the name of this chapter, is acceptable to all religious faiths because it is not religion itself, merely a way of seeing the world in terms of the great truths that all faiths preach. How Boris achieved true peace of mind. One of the things I've done recently that gave me the greatest pleasure was to introduce Boris to the 10 actions of joy. Boris, the owner of a small local factory, was the nearest thing to Scrooge that could exist outside of a book. His factory, only marginally profitable, was constantly racked by battles with the union, and his executive staff turned over so fast that you'd think they were going through a revolving door as soon as he hired them. After several long talks, one stretching into the wee hours of the morning, I finally convinced Boris that he ought to give the 10 actions of joy a try. It was quite a personal battle for him because it was so different from the way he had been living and thinking up until that time. The first noticeable effect was that the turnover of his top executives suddenly stopped. Gradually, he told me, a new atmosphere began to pervade his factory. The union began to get more friendly, and the workers' chip-on-the-shoulder attitude started to fade away. Now, for the first time in years, he recently confided profits have taken a dramatic upsurge. Despite increased costs due to the energy shortage, instead of filing for bankruptcy, he's thinking of opening a second plant. How to achieve cosmic illumination. Down through the ages, the greatest minds of mankind have sought the goal of cosmic illumination, the freeing of the human mind from the bondage of the material world, the Great Enlightenment. Those who have achieved this advanced psychic state report that it is the most wonderful experience known to mankind. There are many ways to do it, some taking many years, some taking considerably less. Zen Buddhism, for example, is primarily concerned with this problem and has worked out a series of meditations called koans, from the Chinese kongan, which can reportedly shorten the time span enormously. It is my belief that these koans are definitely connected with Ultra Psychonics, that meditating upon the seemingly insoluble questions that raise somehow charges the psychons, Ultrons, and Egons that make up the human mind's psychic atoms with a special kind of spiritual energy. When the charge reaches a certain level, I believe there is a breakthrough into a higher energy state, the state we call cosmic illumination or enlightenment. What is this state like? One person described it as a sudden flood of light inside my soul, like sunrise after years in the dark. I knew the exact condition of all living beings throughout all the worlds and all the ages. I saw the cause and effect of all things. There are many koans or koans of increasing difficulty, and it is hard to say how many a particular person should have to go through until he achieves cosmic illumination. Some are reported to have reached the goal almost immediately. Others have not. It would take an entire book just to list the koans that are used today, and obviously I cannot do it here, but I will give you the first two. 1. What did your face look like before you were conceived? 2. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Meditate on the solution to these two koans until you are certain that you know the answers. You will know that your answers are correct when other koans start to occur to you. The master plan of the universe. In other parts of this book, you have seen how antiparticles prove the existence of anti-universes coexisting with our own. Perhaps you have wondered whether there could be a map or a blueprint that would show how the entire cosmos fits together. The ancient Chinese pondered this question for many thousands of years, and eventually they came up with such a map, a master plan of the universe. Naturally, such a map cannot be literal. If it were, it would be the size of a mountain or even larger, and not very useful, since it would be in a constant state of change. The wise men of the East eventually realized that such a map must be symbolic, and he has a yin-yang symbol on the map, with a black dot inside the white and a white dot inside the black. He says to study this map carefully, for it is deceptively simple. It shows both the universe and the anti-universe, and it shows that in each of them there is an empty point into the other. This helps explain how you can manipulate the anti-particles of the anti-universe and use them in this one. But the meaning of the map is much deeper than that. It tells you, for example, that every favorable situation contains a tiny seed of disaster in it, and that every unfavorable situation contains a tiny seed of salvation. It tells you that even the best person is not perfectly good, nor the worst person perfectly bad. It tells you that your worst enemies can be turned into friends if you are careful, and your best friends can become enemies if you are not. There is much, much more in this symbol. Include it in your meditations and you will be amply rewarded. The atomic rights. One immediate application of this cosmic map, however, is in the field of prayer. It points the way to a new kind of prayer, a scientifically based, logically structured method that I believe is much more effective than the old-fashioned method. Not that many old-fashioned prayers do not work. It's a proven fact that they do. But it's always been sort of a hit-and-miss proposition. The atomic rights, as I call them, do not substitute for you regular way of praying. They merely amplify it and clarify it with powered thoughts. How Helga A. overcame her sordid past. Before we move on to the specific techniques, however, I think you'll understand in hearing how this new type of prayer helped an unfortunate woman make a fresh start in life. Helga was trapped into a life of crime at an early age. By the time she was 30, she had been arrested for everything from street walking to shoplifting. "Please help me," she begged. I showed Helga the master plan of the universe and explained its meaning to her. She was surprised to learn that deep within herself lay the key to her rescue. Bit by bit, she took the spot of respectability on the vast expanse of criminal activity and began to expand it. Bit by bit, through prayer and the atomic rights, she received help to build a new life for herself. Finally, she became free of her past and is earning her living as a nurse in a hospital in the Midwest. "Please tell people," she recently wrote, "how I was saved from the pits of hell. Tell them that you may be down, but you're never out." The Ultra-Psychonic ritual for riches. What are the atomic rights? They are special words. Call them chants or rituals, if you will. They are added to regular prayers to reinforce them. Just an electric light outshines a candle, just as a loudspeaker amplifies your voice. These special ultra-psychonic rituals boost your prayers to a higher level of energy. So we'll do the next 5 minutes over these two cones for this particular ritual, which he calls the Psychonic Ritual for Riches. Each cone is how we begin the meditation, and then I will ask a question that you will ponder for 2.5 minutes each. So we begin by saying, "In wealth, there is poverty. In poverty are the seeds of wealth. Help me to plant the seeds of wealth to nourish them and make them grow." 1. What seeds of wealth lie within you right now? How will you use this wealth to help others as well as yourself? Now he recommends sitting for a moment and listening with your mind. How Marvin R. was lifted from poverty. Can this atomic right help you? If it could help Marvin R., I believe it can help anyone. Marvin R. was a penniless hobo who came to my door several years ago and asked for a handout. I took him in, fed him, and talked to him about ultra-sophology. I don't believe it, but I'll try anything, he said. I'm sick and tired of this rotten life. I watched his face as he prayed and performed the atomic rite. It was perfectly blank, and then suddenly, like the sun rising, it was lit up from within. Thank you, he said. I know what to do now. A few years later, I heard from a friend that Marvin R. had gone out to the West Coast and opened up one of the most successful restaurants in the Los Angeles area. And I also heard he is using much of the money he now earns to help rehabilitate other men and women who are temporarily down on their luck. Now we will do the Ultra-Psychonic ritual for love. Love too can be added and supported with the atomic rites. The Ultra-Psychonic ritual for love is similar to the one for riches, for love is the greatest treasure of all. From love came hate, but in hate are the seeds of love. Help me to plant the seeds of love, to nourish them, and make the tree of affection bloom and blossom. 1. Answer this question. What is there in you that is worthy of being loved? How will you return the love that you are so urgently seeking? Once again, listen with your mind. Quietly, you will become aware of exactly what you must do to win the love of the person you care about. How Nancy regained her husband's affection. Nancy was in quite a predicament when I met her. She had run away from her husband and family to go off with a former boyfriend. In a few months, she was pregnant and her boyfriend walked out on her. "How could I be so stupid?" she sobbed. "How can I ever fix things up?" I told her exactly what to do. As she performed the atomic rite for love, a change seemed to come over her. Her eyes grew softer. And for the first time since I had met her that evening, she smiled a little. Then she picked up the phone and called her husband. A few hours later, she got on a bus and went back to her hometown. She must have received a powerful help from the atomic rite. For then I have been receiving an annual Christmas cards from her and her husband, and from the children, old and new. The Ultra-Psychonic ritual of power. For this meditation, he asks, can power over others come from a prayer? Certainly, if the power is intended for a worthwhile purpose. Church leaders, for instance, have such power, and so do heads of charitable institutions. After you have finished whatever prayers are appropriate to your faith, we begin with these words. In strength there is weakness, but in weakness there is strength. Help me to plant the seeds of strength to nourish them and make them grow. 1. What resources of untapped power lie within you now? 2. How will you use your power over others to help them? He tells a story of Edward M. becoming mayor of his town. Edward M. had been trying to become mayor of a nearby town for several years, without much success. When I met him, he almost choked on his lunch when I suggested the atomic rights to him. I'd be the laughingstock of the country if I did something like that, he snorted. You don't understand, Ed, I said. It isn't something you do on a speaker's platform or at a political rally. It's something you do in the privacy of your own home. Ed never would tell me if he had tried the atomic rights, but in the next campaign, he was a new man. Instead of simply attacking the opposition, he spoke about what the town needed and how he could help them get it. He put forth such excellent ideas, in fact, that his opponent even adopted some of them. The ultimate psychonic ritual for friendship. There are prayers that bring new friends and others that mend broken friendships. Both are strengthened with the help of the atomic rights. We begin by saying, friends can turn into strangers, but strangers can be turned into friends. Help me to plant the seeds of friendship, to nourish them and make them grow, and help me to keep the friends I have now well and strong. 1. Why should others seek you out as a friend? 2. How will you help your present friends and the new friends whom you soon will be meeting? Spend a few moments and listen once more with your mind. And if a voice speaks, you will know what to do to find new friends and how to keep the friendships you now have. In the next story, he talks of Carol E., who he had given this atomic rite for, and within 2 weeks of doing the rite, she had maintained many new friendships and was leading a women's organization in the area. She said, "I can't understand it. I'm still the same person I always was, but something has changed." The Ultra-Psychonic ritual for health. Prayers for health are widely said. When all else fails, there is one source that can help, a power that has worked miracles for healing. Here's how to summon this help with the atomic rites. We begin with these words. In health are the germs of sickness. In sickness are the seeds of health. Help me to plant the seeds that will destroy the germs to nourish my body and restore me again. 1. Do you feel that your illness is a punishment for something that you may have done or failed to do? How will you use your health when it is restored to you? How Dennis L. overcame his drinking problem. There are those who say that alcoholism is a sickness and not a vice. Dennis L. is one of them. For many years, he was controlled by a drinking problem that was growing increasingly worse. He lost his job, his family left him, and finally he was thrown out on the street by his landlord. Then his health started to fail. Dennis had always been a fighter, but he just couldn't seem to come to grips with this adversary. "I just can't stop drinking," he told me, "even if it kills me." But with the help of the atomic rites, he came to realize that he drank out of a feeling of guilt about neglect of his spiritual obligations. And with this realization, the seeds of health started to grow within him. Starting as a helper in a Skid Row mission, Dennis gradually regained his health as he worked to aid others. And as he began to participate again in the spiritual life he had repudiated for so many years. Today, restored in body and soul, he is one of the leading figures in the church in his area. As the Bible says, "Ask, and it shall be given to you." The Ultra-Psychonic ritual for golden blessings. Finally, there is the atomic rite for those who neither need nor want any material thing, but simply want to receive the golden blessing that is the greatest of all gifts. After you have finished whatever prayers are appropriate to your faith, you add these words: "The light fades, and there is darkness. But out of the darkness comes the light again. Help me to plant the seeds of light, to nourish my spirit, and to receive the radiance of the golden blessing." Do you feel you are worthy to receive the golden blessing? too. If despite any feelings of unworthiness you may have, you do receive the golden blessing, what will you do to become more worthy of it? He tells of the story of Matt M., forgiven by those who he had wronged. Matt M., a young college student I know, had brought considerable shame on his family. He was arrested for burglary and seemed distant for a long stretch in the penitentiary. But another friend of mine saw Matt before the trial and talked to him about the atomic rights and the golden blessing. Matt was at the end of his rope. His family refused to help him. Most of his former friends would have nothing to do with him, and his girlfriend broke off their engagement. He felt he had nothing left, so he asked for nothing, only for the golden blessing. Then things started to change for him. The court appointed a lawyer to defend him who was more than just a lawyer, a man who had deep understanding of the ways of the mind. He talked to Matt and showed him how he had almost ruined his life. He talked to the people whose house Matt had burgled and showed them what Matt's conviction would mean. And he talked to Matt's family and brought them back to his side. Matt was convinced nevertheless, but he received a suspended sentence, and with his family and friends once more trying to help him, he turned his back on the past and carved out a new life for himself as a youth counselor. He is extremely effective in his new position, he says, perhaps because I have walked that road myself. Secrets of the Bardo Thodol. You've come a long way. You have probed the innermost secrets of the mind, discovered practical techniques to help you in your everyday life, found out how to develop those amazing psychic powers, and learned new ways to resolve spiritual help and enrichment. Is there anything more? Yes, there is the question of what lies beyond the gates of the hereafter. You are, of course, already familiar with the traditional Western views on the subject, but there are others. The Tibetans, for example, have a very unusual scripture called the Bardo Thodol, or the Book of the Dead. It is not a ceremony of burial, but a set of instructions for the deceased, a guide through the mystic realm of the Bardo, a state of existence that lasts for 49 days after death, until the next reincarnation. The Tibetans believe that at the moment of death, a supreme insight and illumination is granted. Soon afterwards, strange illusions begin, and the insight and illumination starts to fade. Eventually, the visions become so terrifying that unless the mind has been prepared for them, the mind starts to deteriorate and lapse back into a purely animalistic state of being. Such a mind begins to pray to sexual fantasies and is lured by the vision of mating couples. The mind is thus easily caught by a womb and then reborn into the earthly world, there to go through the entire cycle again. But the mind that is prepared, the mind that it recognizes and holds on to its moment of supreme illumination, does not disintegrate. Instead, it moves to a higher plane of being and merges into the immutable light, the cosmic mind of the universe. Very interesting, you say, but how does this apply to me? It applies in one important way. If you are now afraid of death, it indicates that death may not be the end of everything, but merely a new beginning. It means that no matter how bad or how hopeless things look now, you will get a second chance. Another ancient book, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, is quite different from the Bardo Thodol. Its hereafter is a courtroom, a judgment scene in which the departed soul first must plead its innocence in a series of negative confessions, and then must hand its heart over to be weighed on a scale balanced against the feather of truth. If the heart was pure, the deceased led a life of bliss and happiness from then on. If the scale fell the other way, the heart was devoured by a crocodile. A petty fable, you say, but again, how does it apply? It is interesting, of course, only in a historical sense, but it indicates that for many thousands of years, long before any of the present world religious systems came into existence, mankind believed that there would be judgment for its actions after death. This was hardly an obvious belief, actually. It would be more to people's advantage to believe the opposite. It must have been based on something real, on psychic and mystical experiences that the ancient papyrus scrolls can only hint at. What it means to you is this: your powers and otherwise should be used only for worthwhile purposes. If you use them for evil, not only is there the danger that they will backfire upon you while you are alive, but they may provide a very unpleasant experience for you afterwards. The meaning of life. All of the foregoing adds up to one thing. You have been placed on this earth for a purpose. A cosmic mission has been assigned to you, and you must discover what it is. If you find your mission in life and fulfill it, you will be rewarded in many ways. If you do not find it or fail to fulfill it, you will be punished. It's as simple as that. The choice is up to you. How to find your place in the Book of Destiny. As you learned earlier, destiny is not fixed but fan-shaped. There are innumerable paths open before you, dependent on your free will. Yet in order to fulfill your true purpose in life, you must choose the correct path. How can you do this? One way is through meditation. Each morning, after you wake up, but before you get out of bed, meditate on these two questions. What am I capable of accomplishing today? And which of these things will help me most to fulfill my cosmic mission? After a few minutes, when you have finished meditating, the correct answers will come to you. Fix them firmly in your mind and act accordingly. Earlier, we talked about how to amplify your prayers by means of the atomic rites, but this method involving, as it does, prayer and meditation is not always feasible, he says, to use in emergencies, in times of trouble, where a decision is needed on very short notice. What should you do? Help from the cosmic mind is always at hand. In such a moment, close your eyes and ask, what path shall I take? Please send me a sign. When you open your eyes, the sign will be before you. Do not hesitate, but act on it immediately. Remember one thing, this is an emergency. Last-ditch technique. Do not use it all the time for minor problems. Or like the boy who cried wolf, it will fail you when you need it most. You have now completed your study, but now you must put it to use. First discover what your cosmic mission is in life. Then select the branches of psychonics that cover the area most closely and get started. A wonderful new future awaits you. And so I thought you would enjoy that chapter and those questions and the writing in general and the story. Walter Delaney or Joe Schomburger clearly, in this book with all of these cool techniques, came to a real understanding of the 10 steps to find joy. And I really enjoyed reading those steps, and that chapter is very powerful. The idea, when looking at the yin and yang, that you always find within the yin a little bit of yang, and within the yang a little bit of yin, and building that into your prayers and affirmation is very powerful. But the 10 actions, the joy of giving, the joy of humility, the joy of working, the joy of caring, the joy of fidelity, the joy of sufficiency, the joy of calmness and learning and meditation and reverence. When you actively try to take action through those 10 things on a daily basis, make it a checklist, you're going to find your days get better and better. When you're doing work that you don't want to do, just find the joy in it. Find the reverence, meditate. All of those things, it seems basic, but it's very powerful if you want to find true happiness. And I believe that Joe Schomburger found true happiness from that interview. It sounds like he had a happy family life, and he was able to take care of his family. And you never know if some of these techniques were actually true or not. But Walter Delaney or Joe Schomburger gave us this beautiful book with wonderful passages in it and wonderful techniques. And I just wanted to bring it forward and take some of these techniques and find out if anybody finds success with them. I'm definitely going to try the water technique. I'm definitely going to try some other things that are in the book, and I may talk about some of it in future episodes, but I thought that you would enjoy that. The story of it, the questions, and everything about it. So thank you, and I hope that you find your power, your friendship, your love, and money, all from those basic questions. Tell me what you think of the Ultra Psychonics and books like this. They fascinate me. I've always been in search for that secret book. It's one of the fun things I've always had. I've always felt like there is a secret book out there that has the answers to everything. And I often do find some incredible books that have the answers to a lot of things. But I would be disappointed if I found that perfect book, because then I would stop searching. But I always feel like this book's going to be the one that's going to have some wonderful things in it. And so I just wanted to share some of that with you. So I hope you're exploring the galaxy. I hope you're activating your psychic atoms. And thank you for sharing this with me. I'm sending out love. I'm sending out love, psychic atoms of love, egons and ultrons of love in every way, shape, and form to anybody that's listening. I'm feeding it into the music that you're listening to. I'm feeding it into the subliminals that you're listening to. And right now you just feel incredible joy. I also think stuff like this is important when you talk about group mind forming and social memory complexes in the Law of One. These techniques are ways to access the social memory complex and the mind and understand it. So I can't wait to find out what you think about it. In any case, all episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.